A lot of people exploring powered parachutes are quickly confronted with the question of buying a powered parachute with either a two-stroke engine or a four-stroke engine. This is not the kind of question you normally get when buying a car or a street bike. On this episode of the Powered Parachute Show, I'm going to explain the differences between the two-stroke and four-stroke engines used on powered parachutes. And I'm going to talk about what the best one may be for you, and I'm going to do that right now. Your car is powered by a four-stroke engine. And if you have a gas-powered weed eater, it is probably equipped with a two-stroke engine. Those are pretty solid bets because four-stroke engines are built for longevity and reliability, and two-stroke engines are generally built to produce as much horsepower as possible from a small, light, and expensive package. Powered parachutes, and for that matter all aircraft, are concerned with weight and power and reliability. Powered parachutes are particularly power-hungry though. That has to do with the relatively inefficient nature of our wings. That means that both two-stroke and four-stroke engines have very appealing features. But unfortunately, we can't average them together and get a three-stroke engine. Doesn't work that way. We have to choose one or the other. So what exactly are two-stroke and four-stroke engines? First of all, the proper language really is two-stroke and four-stroke as opposed to two-cycle and four-cycle. You will hear that alternate terminology a lot, and people using it aren't referring to completely different engines. In fact, you can see that even oil companies can't agree. But the truth is, technically speaking, all internal combustion engines are four-cycle engines. However, in a two-stroke engine, two of the cycles are combined in one stroke, and the two remaining cycles are combined in the second stroke. In a four-stroke engine, each cycle gets its own stroke. That's why the terms two-stroke and four-stroke make more sense. Okay, Roy, so what is a cycle and just what is a stroke? Well, you just asked a couple of great questions. A stroke is when a piston goes either up or down in an engine cylinder. A cycle is part of the critical process of getting fuel and air into the engine and getting power out of it. Each cycle happens very rapidly in a four-stroke and even more rapidly in a two-stroke. Let's go through the cycles and explain them in terms of a four-stroke engine first, since as I pointed out, each cycle gets its own stroke. Then we'll explain how it's all combined in a two-stroke. The intake cycle starts the process. For a four-stroke engine, this cycle begins with the piston at the top dead center, which is the highest the piston can go up, and ends at the bottom dead center, which, you guessed it, is the lowest the piston can go down. In this stroke, the intake valve must be in the open position so the piston can pull a fuel-air mixture into the cylinder by producing a vacuum in the cylinder through its fast downward motion. So the piston is moving down and the fuel-air mixture from the carburetor is being sucked into the cylinder by that downward motion of the cylinder. The compression cycle begins with the piston at bottom dead center or just at the end of the intake cycle and ends at top dead center. In this cycle, the piston compresses the fuel-air mixture in preparation for ignition during the power cycle. Both the intake and exhaust valves are closed during this stage. The combustion cycle is the start of the second revolution of the four-stroke engine. At this point, the crankshaft has completed a full 360-degree revolution. So while the piston is approaching top dead center near the end of the compression stroke, the compressed fuel-air mixture is ignited by a spark plug or two, forcefully pushing the piston down to bottom dead center. This cycle is the moneymaker. It produces the mechanical work from the engine by forcing the crankshaft to turn. On the other hand, the exhaust cycle is the cleanup stroke. During the exhaust cycle, the piston makes the trip up from the bottom dead center to top dead center to clear out the bad air. This time, the exhaust valve is open. The piston pushes the spent fuel-air mixture past the exhaust valve into the exhaust system and ultimately back into the atmosphere. A four-stroke is all very neat and tidy. Each cycle gets its own stroke. No sharing, no real overlap of cycles. Not so with a two-stroke engine. So a two-stroke shares strokes, but how does it share? Well, it looks complicated, which is ironic since two-stroke engines have fewer parts and are ultimately much simpler engines to work on than four-strokes. So you get it, a two-stroke engine has only two strokes, one upstroke and one downstroke. How it works is that a two-stroke engine combines the compression and ignition cycles on its upstroke while combining the power and exhaust cycles on the downstroke. During the intake compression stroke, the piston moves up, draws fuel-air mixture in, and compresses it. During the combustion exhaust stroke, the fuel is ignited, the piston is forced down, and the exhaust is ultimately pushed out. How all of this happens at the same time is somewhat ingenious. That's because instead of official valves, the piston itself becomes a valve. It does that by covering and uncovering ports in the side of the the cylinder at perfectly timed moments. In this example, there are 3 ports in the cylinder wall. One is on the left and 2 are on the right. The top right one allows exhaust gases to escape into the atmosphere. The bottom right one pulls fresh fuel-air mixture into the crankcase of the engine where it gets compressed. The port on the left allows the fresh and compressed fuel-air mixture from the crankcase to enter into the top of the cylinder where it can be ignited. So as we watch the downward movement of the piston, we are observing the combustion exhaust stroke. As the piston is forced down by the ignited fuel-air mixture, it uncovers the top port midway on the right side of the cylinder wall. That allows the bad air out. Meanwhile, the lower right port is allowing fresh fuel-air mixture into the lower part of the engine known as the crankcase. The lower port is then closed by the piston. As the lower right port leading from the carburetor is closed, the left port opens up and the fuel-air mixture from the crankcase is pushed and pulled into the cylinder by the piston that is creating lower pressure above it with its downward movement, along with higher pressure below it. That is the beginning of the intake compression stroke. Exhaust gases are still leaving the cylinder while the fresh fuel-air mixture is drawn in. As the piston moves up, first the left port is closed and then the exhaust port on the upper right is closed. That allows the fuel-air mixture to be fully compressed and then ignited in order to start the combustion exhaust stroke all over again. Of course, there is a lot more to it for both 4-stroke and 2-stroke engines, but that gives you a basic idea. By the way, if you're enjoying this content, please take a moment to give me an upvote. Your subscription to the channel and your likes for the videos are highly motivational to me. Thanks so much. Well, the big question becomes, why should we care about 2-strokes and 4-strokes? Well, there is a lot to care about. First, there is expense. And as we get into this comparison, it makes sense to point out that over 90% of 2-seat powered parachutes use Rotax engines. Therefore, it makes sense to focus on those engines for the sake of this discussion. The most commonly used Rotax 2-stroke, the Rotax 582 with a Model E gearbox, costs over $8,000 retail. The most commonly used Rotax 4-stroke, the Rotax 912 ULS, costs over $21,000 retail. That is over 2.5 times as expensive. If you consider that most of the powered parachutes available have used Rotax 582 engines on them, that makes the price of a 2-stroke powered parachute even more reasonable. And it certainly makes 2-strokes worth considering. Engines are all about power. And the power delivered by the Rotax 912 ULS is impressive, 100 horsepower. The Rotax 582 is 65 horsepower. But horsepower isn't the only thing to consider since we are talking about aviation. 2-stroke engines are generally lighter and have a higher power-to-weight ratio. But that isn't the case when you compare these 2 particular engines. The Rotax 912 ULS weighs approximately 143 pounds. The Rotax 582 with an E gearbox is about 104 pounds. That means that with the 912 ULS, you are going to get about 0.7 horsepower per pound of engine. With a 582, you're only getting 0.6 horsepower per pound. Even with the heavier frame needed to support the Rotax 912, you are getting not only more power, but probably a higher power-to-weight ratio. Part of the value of an engine is how long it lasts. That is measured by the time you get to run it before it needs to be overhauled. Time between overhaul favors the Rotax 912 ULS. A new engine can be run for 1,500 hours or 12 years. All of the Rotax 2-stroke engines are only good for 300 hours or 5 years. Yes, that means that the Rotax 912 ULS will run 5 times longer before you need to overhaul it. If you guesstimate that an overhaul for a 2-stroke runs about half the price of a new engine, that means that you will have to invest the original $8,000 plus $4,000 times 4 times to get the same number of hours as the 912. Yes, that makes the total investment for the same number of hours just about the same if you compare new to new. Then there are reliability issues. Now, the common knowledge is that 2-strokes fail more often than 4-strokes. I don't necessarily agree. My personal experience is that the Rotax 582 and the earlier 503 are pretty bulletproof engines. They certainly are when you treat them right. I will admit that I still feel a little more secure flying a 4-stroke though. Despite my very positive experiences with the Rotax 2-strokes, I just can't help feeling a little happier having a 4-stroke push me along in the sky. 4-strokes are known for being much more fuel efficient, but that seems to be a wash with 2-stroke powered parachutes versus 4-stroke powered parachutes. The higher power settings needed to keep the extra weight afloat seems to even out the consumption numbers. Haven't tested that, but the documentation and general experience seems to support it. A big edge to powered parachutes using 2-strokes is the nimbleness of the machines. Lighter often equals more fun, and I still have a warm place in my heart for the older, lighter, fun-to-fly 2-strokes, especially when I'm flying solo. The bottom line, 90% of the Rotax engines used on the existing fleet are 2-stroke Rotax 503 or Rotax 582 engines. That means that if you are going to purchase a used machine, you are going to probably be buying a 2-stroke. That isn't a bad thing if you're on a budget, since those machines are really discounted and are still a blast to fly. But if you're buying new, a 4-stroke Rotax 912 ULS with its power, reliability, and longevity is hard to beat. Finally, if you are interested in powered parachute flight instruction in either the Midwest or in Florida, please visit the link to easyflight.com in the comments. And please remember to grace me with your upvote. Thanks so much for watching, and blue skies.